My great aunt had died the year before. Her house was locked up in probate until issues of inheritance were settled. My father was acting as caretaker of the property, which meant that I took care of the place while my old man bought booze with my great aunt's money. I didn't mind. It got me out of my place, away from my old man, and it made a nice place to have parties and hang out with friends. My friend Chris loved the place. I think he also needed a place to hide, somewhere away from his own house with all of his dead mother's things lying around, right where they left them, before a sleep-deprived truck driver snuffed out her life like a candle on a store-bought birthday cake. Our big plan was to host a Halloween party, just for our small group of friends. Chris quickly latched onto the idea of having a seance and spent a lot of time at the library, or at some of the local used bookstores, doing some research. I told him it was no big deal, that it was just a stupid party trick, but he insisted on getting it right. I guess Chris was messed up about his mother's death. I should have thought about that, about why he was so concerned with contacting the dead. But he didn't talk about her very much, and as I've said before, I was stupid. There are things that happen when you are 19 that stay with you. You don't think that they will, but they do. If that's not the definition of haunted, I don't know what it is. I met Chris as he was walking back from the dollar store that evening. He was carrying several bags of Halloween candy, some chips, and a few bottles of soda. He climbed into my car and I drove us out to the house. He dumped the candy into a large plastic bowl and smacked my hand when I tried to steal some. "That's for the trick-or-treaters, you jerk," he said. As the afternoon faded into the evening, the trick-or-treaters did show up, giggling in their Spider-Man and Incredible Hulk masks. I doled out candy while Chris ordered pizza and set up the food on the kitchen table. Pete, Liz, and Sophia arrived by 8. I was excited that Sophia would show up. I had been crushing on her for months, but at 6'4", 140, and bright red curly hair, I looked like a scarecrow that tried to dress up like Ronald McDonald. Sophia was tiny, cool, beautiful, with jet black hair and skin that may have never seen sunlight. She was my secret reason for having the party. I didn't stand a chance, but a guy could hope, right? Liz was Pete's longtime girlfriend. She was almost as tall as me, with a shaved head, several piercings, and full-sleeve tattoos on both arms. Now, I'm pretty smart, but Liz was a genius. She had aced every exam without trying, and was already taking college classes when we were in 9th grade. We had been friends for several years, and had shared several classes in high school until she had dropped out halfway through in 12th grade. The vice principal told her in no uncertain terms that she would not allow a tattooed freak like Liz to represent the school as the valedictorian. Liz broke the woman's jaw in 2 places, and that was pretty much it for Liz's public education. Pete was wrecked when he walked through the door. I had been friends with Pete since we were toddlers. His mother had worked with mine at the same hospital before Mother left town. I loved Pete like he was a brother, but he had several bad habits, self-destruction being high on the list. He nodded his hello and then stumbled to the cabinet where my great-aunt kept her liquor and proceeded to liberate a bottle of peach schnapps. By 9, Pete had retired to the monstrous old red couch in the living room, cold cloth over his eyes and a bucket by his side. "Why is he drinking so much?" I asked Liz as we shoved the furniture out of the way. Chris and Sophia rolled up the large area rug, exposing the hardwood floor beneath. "Nah, he failed his driver's license exam," Liz said, rolling her eyes. "Again?" Chris said, brushing his thick brown hair out of his eyes. "That's like what, his 5th time taking it? I thought that they just give it to you out of pity after 5 times. "At least he didn't vomit blueberry pancake on the instructor's shoes," like he did last time, Sophia said. The heavy old grandfather clock in the living room bonged 10 times. Chris stood up. Okay, everyone, let's get started. Liz tried to get Pete to join us, but he was fast asleep. Chris returned to the room carrying a large wooden box. He opened the box and removed a small jar of salt and several candles. He motioned for us to sit in a circle as he poured the salt into a double ring around us. He poured another, smaller double ring a few feet away in front of the fireplace, and then carefully taped down several pieces of paper on which he had previously drawn strange geometric symbols. I took the candles and positioned them at points around the circle, then lit them with my Zippo. Chris motioned for us to sit within the larger circle. He dimmed the lights and joined us. We took our positions around a small wooden toolbox. Now, the circle was small, and when Sophia sat next to me, her knee touched mine. I tried to concentrate on something other than her perfume. Chris folded open the top and removed a metal bowl, which he placed into a metal strand. He pulled some pieces of wood from the box, put them in the bowl, and lit them. He pulled a fabric shroud object from the box and placed it in front of him. The dark cloth revealed a book bound in black leather, and when Chris opened the yellow pages, instead of being brittle, they turned with an odd ease. Chris flipped through the pages, and when he stopped, the sallow pages lay slackly open, without a hint of curling. He began a low chant in a sing-song rhythm. While chanting, Chris dropped wads of dried herbs into the metal bowl. Heavy, acrid yellow smoke billowed up, stinging her eyes. "Ancient spirits," Chris said as we stared at him with rapt attention. "Ancient spirits, hear us. We beseech you. Ancient spirits, hear our call. Ancient spirits, answer us. Ancient spirits, come to us. Ancient spirits, the way is open. Ancient spirits, take this offering and come to us." Chris ran a scalpel that none of us had seen before, across the palm of his hand. Liza recoiled in shock, and the blood sizzled as it met the flames in the bowl. "Jesus, Chris," Sophia said. He shushed her with a glare. "Ancient spirits," Chris called, "hear us! The way is open! Answer our..." The doorbell chimed. We all jumped, including Chris. The doorbell chimed again, and through the door we heard muffled voices. "Trick or treat!" Sophia huffed and rolled her eyes. "The ancient spirits are here, and they want candy. I thought you turned off the porch light." She stood up and walked to the door. She flipped on the porch light and opened the door. 2 little kids were standing there, both dressed like witches, with pointy hats and green masks. They giggled, shoving their widespread pillowcase sacks towards Sophia, and yelled, "Trick or treat!" at the top of their lungs. Sophia looked around for the candy dish, then saw it on the kitchen table. It was empty, save for some wrappers. Sorry kids, we're all out. That's what it means when the porch light's off." The kids looked at each other for a moment. "Can we come in for a minute, ma'am? My sister really has to go to the bathroom." Sophia nodded and stood aside as 2 little pointy witch hats bobbled past. As the shorter of the pair two went to the bathroom, the taller stood near the couch, next to Pete. She said nothing and was very still. I found myself sneaking glances at her mask. It seemed far too elaborate for a child's mask, and the black pits that hid her eyes seemed to drink in the light. There was a crash from the hallway leading to the bathroom. Chris and I jumped to our feet and ran to see what had happened. The smaller of the two children kneeling at the entrance to the hallway. "I'm really sorry. I broke the mirror on the wall. My hat is too big and I must have caught the frame. I tripped. I can't see where I'm going." She tilted her head down and began to cry softly. "It's just a cheap old mirror," Chris said. He extended a hand. His cut hand, I thought to myself without knowing why, and pulled her up. "It's getting late. Your parents must be worried." "Yes, it's almost midnight. Sister, we should be going." We turned to see the sister leaning over Pete's sleeping form, green mask pressed close to his ear. "Hey, what are you doing to Pete?" Liza said. She stood and walked towards the taller child. "He was sleeping," the taller witch shrugged. Her rubbery, pointed green nose bobbled. "I was telling him to have sweet dreams." The two children left, clutching their pillowcase sacks and josting each other as they walked down the sidewalk. I watched them go, and as I saw them turn the corner, I think that I may have seen them both take turns licking at the smaller one's hand. We shut off the lights, bolted the front door, and relit a few candles that had gone out. Chris picked up his book again as we rejoined him inside the salt circle. "Ancient spirits, hear us," he cried. "Ancient spirits, we call you. Ancient spirits, hear our call. Ancient spirits, answer us." The old grandfather clock began to toll, the first of 12. Chris sprinkled more sage into the redly glowing metal bowl. "Ancient spirits, we beseech you!" A candle went out. Sophia snorted and put her hand on mine. My heart slammed to a stop. Then I realized that she was only trying to pull the Zippo that I had been fidgeting with out of my hand. She winked, then reached over to light the candle. But then another candle went out, and another, and then the room was plunged into a murky darkness only lit from the flickers of the coal in the metal bowl. "Okay," said Chris with only a slight tremor to his voice. "The ancient spirits have heard our call and have responded." He shifted slightly and closed the box. On top of the box was an ornate inlay of letters and numbers in the style of a Ouija board. Chris drew a small white planchette from his shirt pocket and beckoned for us to place our hand upon it. We moved the planchette on the board in small, slow circles. "Ancient spirits, are you here with us?" Something crashed in the kitchen. I made as if I had to get up, and Chris motioned for me to stop. "Don't leave the circle," he said. "Stay inside the circle, never break it. Nothing can harm you if you don't cross the boundary." We placed our hands back on the planchette. "Ancient spirits, are you here with us?" Chris asked again, and the planchette slowly moved to a corner. Yes. Boards creaked in the darkened room around us. "This is too spooky, Chris," Sophia said. "It feels like something's watching us. Oh." Sophia looked down. In the twitching, red glow of the flames, a shadow seemed to spread across Sophia's chest. She looked up at us and opened her mouth to speak. A flood of blackness flowed out of her mouth and down her chin. She slumped forward, knocking over the metal bowl, and the burning coals scattered. "Sophia!" I lunged towards her. A smoldering coal burned my hand, but I didn't feel it. I could only think about Sophia's beautiful hair. It was on fire. "Get the lights!" Chris yelled, standing. He shoved me off Sophia, out of the circle. I scrambled to my feet. I could see nothing in the inky blackness. Liz was screaming over and over. A wall should have been inches away, but I felt nothing. I reached out frantically. My fingertips caught something, the sleeve of a shirt, and then it jerked away. There was a blinding, burning pain on my arm. I fell flat and away, clutching the wound. Blood soaked through the sleeve of my shirt. I crouched low, trying to see something, anything. I turned back to the circle. Liz's face, giving a mouth of O of surprise, had jerked backwards as her slashed throat sprayed across the room and the hint of copper wafted to my nostrils. I turned to the right, arm out, and I ran. My hand slammed into a doorway with force. A fingernail peeled back, and I dropped to my knees and then crawled forward. My fingers met the cold steel of the refrigerator, and I flung the door open. Light flooded the kitchen. I huddled in the corner, shaking. I heard a racking scream from the other room. Chris! I snatched a heavy cast iron frying pan from the stove. Heavy pain raised high. I stood to the side of the doorway, blood trickling into a pool in the elbow of my shirt. I heard the slow slide of footsteps. There was a low whispering breath, and I was paralyzed. What if it was Chris or Sophia? Light glinted off of the butcher knife. I swung as hard as I could, my lips peeling back in a rictus grin. I grunted it involuntarily. Ah! The edge of the cast iron pan caved in Pete's face as if it were a Sunday morning egg. He went down in an untidy heap. I swung and swung, bashing his head until it was a lumpy mess, until his body stopped twitching. Still clutching the pan, I ran for the front door. It took me an hour to reach the front door. The front door could not have been further than 15 feet away, but it felt like miles. As I stumbled and crawled to the door, terrible things whispered to me, laughing at me, mocking me. I saw the dim shapes scuttle away as I looked, eyes strained to see my attackers. They darted in and gouged my eyes with claws and hot, grasping hands. I flailed blindly in the dark with the frying pan, but they only laughed. When I did reach the door, it was locked. I smashed the antique stained glass with a blow, then climbed through it, lacerating my hands and arms more in the process. The official police report stated that Peter McCulty, 19 years old, Caucasian male, several priors including vandalism and possession, was under the influence of a large amount of controlled substances, traces of Adderall, Effexor, PCP, psilocybin, and certain other unidentified, experienced a psychotic break, and killed several people. Initially, I was suspect number 1. A police officer found me walking down the middle of the street, covered in blood and bleeding from dozens of cuts. Fist clenched tightly around a cast iron pan. The police took a dim view of my story, and once it was determined that drugs had been involved, they ignored it completely. As far as the cops were concerned, a bunch of kids took some acid on Halloween. They played at a satanic ritual. Then one went off his rocker and killed a few of the others. It happens every Halloween. I was then placed in psychiatric custody for 2 weeks. It was only after I was released that I found out that the police had only recovered 3 bodies, not 4. They never found Chris, or any other trace of him. I have never gone back to that house. I think about going back every night. I take my meds that make me forget, mostly, and suppress the whispers that I hear in those long black hours before dawn. But sometimes, I still hear them. Every year as Halloween approaches, the voices get louder, even if I up my dose. They tell me terrible things. They tell me that it was my fault. They tell me that I was the one with the knife.
The same trick-or-treater keeps coming to my house. He's starting to scare me. By Blair Daniels. Narrated by Autumn Ivy. I hate Halloween for many reasons. I have to answer the door every 10 minutes. I have to pretend like I'm excited to give bratty kids free candy. I have to stay inside because driving on a road filled with crazy running children gives me panic attacks. I plopped down in the chair by the window. Hordes of children in garish costumes ran down the sidewalks, shepherded by tired mothers. I sighed as a group of children crossed the street and started towards my house. The doorbell chimed, echoing inside the home. I heaved myself up, grabbed the bag of Milky Ways, and walked towards the door. Trick or treat! 5 kids stood on the doorstep. A few princesses, a Batman, and a devil. I unceremoniously grabbed handfuls of candy and plopped them in each kid's bag. One murmured, "Thank you." The rest were ungrateful little brats. "Can I have more?" I looked up. The devil kid was staring at me, holding out his bag. His blonde hair shone in the porch light, his eyes a piercing ice blue. There was something oddly familiar about him, but I couldn't place it. Sure, I replied. I dropped a few more Milky Ways in the bag. He didn't thank me. He just silently turned around and walked off my porch, following the other children. I shut the door and returned to my perch by the window. I watched as the 4 children walked off my lawn, joining a mother at the end of the driveway. Then the group disappeared into the shadows of dusk. Scarcely 2 minutes later, the doorbell rang again. I grabbed the bag of Milky Ways and tromped to the door. I straightened my blouse, plastered a smile on my face, and swung the door open. Trick or treat! A similar mix of kids. 2 Elsas, Marshall from Paw Patrol, and a ninja. "Oh, how scary you all look," I said. They giggled and swarmed around for the candy. All except for the ninja. He stood back from the rest, silently watching. His entire face was covered with black cloth, save for his chilling blue eyes. "Thank you!" The kids cheered, stepping off the porch. As they did, the ninja kid stepped forward. His eyes glinted under the porch light, and even though his mouth was covered, I could tell he wasn't smiling. "Can I have more?" he said. My blood ran cold. It was the same voice. I stood there in the doorway, frozen. The Milky Way bag hung limply from my hands. There's no way he could have changed costumes that fast. I mean, how can it be him? This must be some kind of a joke, or... "Can I have more?" he asked again. I snapped out of my thoughts. "Sure. Of course," I said. I threw a large handful of Milky Ways in his plastic jack-o'-lantern candy bowl. That's when I noticed it was empty. If he'd been trick-or-treating all evening, how could it be empty? "Hey," I said. Are you okay?" But he had already turned away, running back across my lawn. In seconds, he was gone, camouflaged in the dusky shadows among the fellow trick-or-treaters. I sat back down on the chair and stared at the floor. I didn't want to look out at the swarm of kids anymore. I just wanted to be alone. Those blue eyes, I know I've seen them before, and not under good circumstances. Whenever I'd seen them before, something bad or embarrassing must have happened at the time. Seeing them again filled me with an inexplicable dread. I ran my fingers through my hair. Maybe he came to my house last year, but that didn't make sense. Last year, I'd been over at my ex-boyfriend Drew's house. We'd gotten into a terrible fight that lasted for hours, and I'd left late. I hadn't handed out a single piece of candy. My head jolted up. Through my own reflection in the glass and the dark shadows of dusk, I could make out something. A pair of blue eyes. I jumped back with a terrified shriek. Then I grabbed the cord and pulled. The blinds dropped with a clatter. His footsteps raced over the damp grass, fading into the night. Who the hell is he? I didn't have time to think about it. I didn't move. I didn't want to answer the door and see that kid again. But I also couldn't listen to the doorbell ring for 10 minutes. I heaved myself out of the chair, forced a smile, and swung it open. Trick-or-treat! My eyes glanced over the trick-or-treaters nervously. A fairy with curly hair, an Incredibles boy with brown eyes, a little girl in a tutu. None of them were him. I breathed a sigh of relief. Here you go, I said with a grin. I was so relieved I gave each of them about 10 Milky Ways. They squealed in delight and scampered back towards their parents. I slowly pushed the door closed. It squeaked against the hinges and slammed shut. I returned to my chair, glanced at my phone. 8:19 p.m. The den of children outside was finally fading. When I peeled back the blinds, the flow of little costumed figures was heading towards the main road. Within 20 minutes, the noises faded to silence. I flipped through a book, checked my texts, and got comfortable. I picked up the candy bag, which was now nearly empty. Only 4 fun-size bars floating in the bottom. God, I hope it's not more than 4 kids. It wasn't. It was just one child. He was wearing some sort of a werewolf costume. The outfit was black, tufts of fur haphazardly taped to his body. On his head was a hideous mask. The plastic snout contorted into a snarl, revealing yellow teeth. Fake blood dripped from its mouth, caking the fur on his shoulders. Do you want some candy? I asked, my voice starting to waver. I glanced at the road. It was empty. All the kids were gone. A terrible dread sunk in my heart. My hand quivered on the doorknob. Can I have some more? I slammed the door shut in his face. I clicked the locks. I ran to the back door and locked it. I closed the windows, and then I threw myself into the chair and sobbed. The costume was familiar. Horribly familiar. The yellow, sightless eyes. The pointed plastic teeth, familiar and alien all at once. I wrapped my arms around my knees and sat there, motionless on the couch, listening to the silence. I jolted up. My heart throbbed in my chest. I whipped around looking for the source of the noise. Hello? I called. It was coming from the living room. I squinted in the shadows, trying to make sense of the shapes. I could see the silhouette of the floor lamp near the window, the bulky outline of the couch. Something stood between them. Something short with a horrible, contorted face. Can I have more? The voice quietly called out of the darkness. How did you get in here? I scrambled back into the family room. The golden light enveloped me, and I felt slightly better. He's probably just some lost kid, I told myself. I'll call the police. They'll find his parents. I mean, it's all just some kind of a misunderstanding. We'll find your parents, okay? I said, choking back the fear. Let me just make a call. We'll get you home safely, okay, buddy? He didn't reply. Instead, he took a slow step forward. As he came towards the light, I saw there was something terribly off about him. His head tilted strangely to one side. His left arm was twisted and mangled. With each step, his body lurched forward unnaturally. Are you okay? I asked. Silence. The fake blood that dripped from the werewolf's snout was now soaking him. His pale little hands were covered in the red, shiny liquid. The black outfit glistened in the moonlight. The fur was caked and matted. Can I have more? I backed into the family room. I fumbled for my phone. It was gone. I grabbed at anything I could find, and my hands latched onto the nearly empty candy bag. "This?" I asked. "Is this what you want?" The child didn't reply. He took a step forward. Here, you can have it!" In my terrified state, I threw it at him. The bag bounced off his chest and landed at his feet. He didn't pick it up. "Can I have more?" "I gave you more!" He looked at me with those horribly familiar yellow eyes. Then he stopped. He stood just a few feet from me, bloody hands hanging stiffly at his sides. I took a step back and hit the wall. I was cornered. "Who are you?" I yelled. My plan to stay calm and call the police was long gone. I descended into panic. "Why won't you leave me alone?" The tiny black pupils fixed on me, and he spoke. For the first time, he didn't ask for more. "Do you remember me?" "What are you talking about?" "Do you remember what you did to me?" His high-pitched, lisping voice was muffled through the mask. "Do you remember what you did 1 year ago?" 1 year ago. 1 year ago on Halloween night. How could I forget? I was storming out of Drew's house, fuming, swearing I'd never see him again. Slam. The sound of my car door cutting sharply through the night. The engine revving underneath me. The headlights blinked on in the darkness. I wasn't paying attention. I was thinking about the fight. I didn't even glance behind me before I backed out of the driveway. I never even saw him. The black werewolf costume against the night rendered him nearly invisible, and it was over before I knew what was happening. When I ran out of the car and saw the broken, mangled body of a little boy in a werewolf costume and ripped off the mask to see his lifeless eyes staring back up at me, I didn't call the police. I didn't call for help. I panicked. I got back into the car, drove over the grass, and peeled out of the neighborhood before anybody could see what I had done. "Do you remember, Eliza?" The child cocked his head at an even greater angle as he stared at me through the mask. "Do you remember now?" "I do." I choked through sobs. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I was upset. I wasn't paying attention." "Can I have more?" I looked up. He'd taken off his mask. The left side of his head was crushed. Blood dripped down his face, staining his pale skin, caking his blonde hair. One ice blue eye was squashed deep into its socket, the other perfectly intact. His neck was bent at a horribly unnatural angle. "Can I have more?" he asked. His lips parted to reveal shattered teeth, a scarred tongue. "Can you have more what?" I asked. "Can I have more time?" "More time?" "More time to be alive." I wish I could give that to you. My breath shuddered in my throat. "I wish I could give you life." "You can," he replied. His voice suddenly became raspier, darker. "Just give me yours." I stared at him, numb, weak. My heart ached for the poor, pathetic, mangled child in front of me. It was my fault. I ran him over. I did this to him. "I can't give you mine," I said. I backed away, further into the room. He advanced quickly, walking towards me in swift, lithe strides. "You don't have a choice," he said. What are you talking about?" His mouth widened into a crooked grin. "Trick or treat!" I bolted for the door. I yanked it open, ran out across the yard, screaming into the night. I didn't stop until one of the neighbors found me, standing in the middle of the road, absolutely incoherent. That was 1 year ago. In 2 days, it will be Halloween again. I've already seen him. A small figure across the street dressed in all black, watching me, waiting, wearing a hideous werewolf mask.
It's Friday night, and after another hard week, you want to party, have fun, and maybe even meet someone. You decide to go to a club. Even though it's not your usual spot, you'll find a seat at the bar, scan the crowd, and order your first drink. A girl sits down next to you. She appears to be just what you're looking for. Young, blonde, and in great shape. She strikes up a conversation, mentioning to you that she's a medical student at the local college. You find this a little bit amusing because on this particular Halloween night, she's dressed as a doctor, albeit not one that you would find in your typical operating room, but one that you might find starring in an adult video. You ask her if she wants to dance, and she agrees. As the night progresses, you have more drinks and engage in some get-to-know-you conversation. At one point, she asks you about your blood type, which strikes you as a bit odd. She explains to you that you can determine someone's personality based on their blood type, which sounds about as silly as astrology to you. After more dancing and more drinks, she suggests that you should go back to her place, and you're all in. You head outside, and her apartment is just a block or two away. As you make out in the elevator, things start to get hazy. When you finally reach her apartment, you notice that it's small but clean and nicely furnished. She offers you some champagne from the fridge and you accept. After a couple of sips, everything starts to blur. You try to get up, but you can't. And just before you pass out, you see her calling someone on her cell phone. Slowly you open your eyes, feeling disoriented. You're lying on your side in a brightly lit room, and you hear a loud heartbeat. It becomes evident that you're in a hospital-like setting. Suddenly you realize you're not breathing, and you panic. You try to grasp for air, scream, and move, but nothing happens. You look down at your body and realize you have no lungs, and no air can escape your throat. The beating heart you hear is not yours. In fact, you have no body. Your head rests on an operating table with two hoses coming from your neck, connecting to a complex machine. EEG electrodes covering your scalp, producing wiggling lines on a monitor. The machine oxygenates your blood, adds nutrients, and pumps it back into your head through one hose while blood leaves through the other to repeat the cycle. The horror overwhelms you. You discover that someone else is in the room. Though you can't see them, you can only move your jaw, eyes, and eyelids. A man in surgeon's attire and thick-rimmed eyeglasses enters your field of vision. He checks the EEG machine and shines a tiny flashlight into each of your eyes. He asks you to wink twice if you can hear him, and you do. The girl you met at the club also enters the room and seems excited that you've awakened. She refers to you as it. The surgeon gently lifts you from the table and secures you in a specially designed neck support on your life support machine. He then wheels the machine with you down the hallway and into another room. In the small, windowless room, you see three other heads. An elderly woman looking at you with sad, tormented eyes. A middle-aged man stares blankly at a TV showing an infomercial, and an old man has his eyes closed. A surgeon snaps his fingers in front of the old man's face, getting him to open his glassy eyes. The surgeon introduces himself and explains that he's a retired surgeon who now teaches at the college. He wanted to research the means of keeping a head alive without a body, believing it could save millions of terminally ill and lethally injured individuals. However, the research proved too controversial, and he couldn't obtain permission to experiment with animals, let alone humans. So, he continued his research illegally, using terminally ill volunteers, mostly elderly. He needed a young and healthy subject for his experiments, and one of his students, with whom he had a special relationship with, helped him find a volunteer. He mentions that the longest he has managed to keep a head alive was 2.5 years, but he believes that with the improved technology since then, he could keep a younger subject alive almost indefinitely. You wish that you could just die. That's not an option. And there's nothing more you can do about it.